welcome back. We have our Arab Amp Folktales series for the month of June. Really excited to talk this month with Doga Cavdir, who is with us now, and is also the artist feature for this month. So we're really lucky to be in conversation with her. Well, first of all, welcome. And starting this conversation, I just always want to ask, if you could introduce yourself, introduce a little bit about what you do, especially around the making of instruments, which I know the artist video really focuses on this month. Then we'll just dive in. Really excited to talk to you, Doa. Your work is incredible.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm Doa. I'm a sound and performing artist and designing musical instruments. And these instruments are usually deal with body movement and movement expression. So I design instruments that are variable and allow performers to be able to move or dance when they make music. And some of these instruments were kind of also dealing with accessibility and inclusion issues around hearing, and kind of like tries to construct performance experiences and listening experiences that is accessible to all, hearing spectrum, including hard of hearing, deaf artists, listeners and performers. I've been also collaborating with deaf dancers and designing interfaces that allows them to listen the sound through vibrations when in these variable interfaces. So my work is kind of like around this realm, creating more inclusive listening and performance experiences, sometimes with new instruments, sometimes with installations.
That's so many different pieces and layers to this work. So just to start, I guess, why instruments or why movements and different interactions, I guess, with performers and musicians, sounds, feelings that are variable, and why working with different communities, and particularly deaf communities or hearing impaired communities.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I've always been so I grew up also like dancing and playing music. So I always kind of had this like understanding that music is very kinesthetic, very movement-based. And when I started designing instruments, I wanted to design something that would, capture both spaces, like allow musicians or performers move more than they can normally do. And I realized that including non-musical gestures or body movements, sometimes dance-like body movements, sometimes sign language gestures, sometimes other forms of gesture categories, allows like the music become a bit more expressive in terms of how we use our bodies, how we use our space around us, and movement qualities. So that was my first inspiration. And then I've been looking into different set of gestures and started working with American Sign Language gestures. And that kind of requires like a whole different instrument and like a composition too. So I wanted to create this listening experience that would not necessarily require the popular hearing culture's abilities, and it would extend the abilities beyond. What we can hear are actually treating listening as like a physical, bodily, process, an embodied process. So that piece included low frequency sound with subwoofers based speakers. So people could actually sit close to these speakers, feel the vibrations in their bodies, and not necessarily like this focus on the solely auditory experience. So that's kind of like started working with different communities, and the more that I work with, deaf and hard of hearing communities, I also learned like how they listened, how they interacted with the sound world, and that's been really interesting. And there's a lot of movement, body movement, expression, and artistic, kind of creativity goes into their understanding of the auditory world, and that was really inspiring for me and started exploring that area.
Wow. I guess what's kind of a story or like a highlight that you think about or that you take with you when you do this work? And another question I have is kind of your role or relationship to this work as a hearing person, and any kind of thoughts or connections, I guess, to like both the lessons of the work itself, the power of like community building through this model, and also just artistic practice, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I've learned, during the process is that it's my own experience as a mover. I come from musical backgrounds and I danced, but I did not, continue dancing professionally. So what I've seen also in musicians that, performers want to express more than what they create with music. And that tends to be body movements. But they don't have the vocabulary or, the support to actually express. And some of those instruments helped also them and me too, and kind of learned so much about, my own movement, my own expression through these, bodily movements, and how I actually use them in the presence of sound. I think that has been inspiring. But the biggest takeaway was when I worked with a deaf dancer last year in Sweden. So she was a Swedish Sign Language signer, so it was her main language. She also had some physical limitations, but we worked around that. And a lot of things that we experienced was there is definitely like a lot of access issues, from both sides. And as a hearing person, that's there's the boundary between kind of the deaf communities and the hearing communities. It's easy to cross, but unfortunately, there is so much access issues. It's hard to access to deaf community, but at the same time, for deaf community, it's hard to access to the arts community in the hearing culture. Be active. Active performers within this space. So that's been one of my experiences in general as a hearing person. But working with Miri, the deaf dancer in Sweden, it was really rewarding because she was really engaged and she wanted to listen to the music, and she didn't have a lot of experience with music before. And she wanted to actually use interfaces that we were working with to compose music, to understand. And she expressed that she wanted to share her compositions with the world. And that kind of shows that this very big need in this, space, in this field, where we need to, where there's a lot of things needs to be done. But that was really rewarding to see her interpret music and vibrations in terms of her movements and really expressing, her desire to be able to compose and listen music that is accessible to her.
Wow, it's really cool to be able to compose something that reflects an emotional landscape or can help, and imbue an experience for somebody else. It's pretty powerful, I think. And just thanks for sharing that story. I think thinking about we know many of us who are into arts or who have like dance, music, different expressions, writing, right, as part of like our daily practice or our lives. We're that lucky or that committed. I don't know. To be able to, I think also for us to be able to experience and access music that is, and, different art forms that are made, I think with different people in mind and different perspectives is really valuable. And I appreciate that your work also kind of highlights the way that we think about things like music are also kind of ableist, right? Like it doesn't, it also perhaps opens up a window to really think about how the music that we experience is much more than just listening to it, right? All of us have that visceral, different layers of that experience. I also appreciate that you talked about like, kind of hearing dominance, right? And how that kind of skews our perception of even what's possible or what's like, legitimate in terms of like a collaboration, what the limits are. And this, I think your story and also the work that you do really opens up like a mirror. It opens up an opportunity to really reflect back on that, and it will make us all better musicians and artists and better, I think, practitioners also of the things that we do. I don't know if you want to comment on any of the pieces of the video that you submitted, maybe also talking about like the multiplicity of layers or the different contributions of your work, how they kind of work with each other.
Yeah. So the piece that I submitted for this residency is a little different outside. Like I'm not using any of these instruments. And it's part of a series that I'm still exploring. And the first one was kind of creating this listening experience in a very vibrant space, and still engaging with these kinesthetic objects, and kind of observing the music from the sense of how they move in the space and being able to hear how the space reflects back. And that was because of the reverberation in that room, and also the composition. It still creates similar physical sensations in the body. So it really focuses on the listening experience as a bodily experience and not oral only. So the piece that I submitted for the residency is kind of the continuation of that exploration. I'm using, I've been composing on the piano strings by different bowing techniques. So I'm using a composition, and I had an installation and it's at Temescal with the fishing lines. And it's been really interesting to explore how engaging with objects that kind of carves and defines the space, the performance space, opens up new explorations. And kind of seeing it as also a reflection of what has been happening in Turkey, over time since February. We've been dealing with earthquakes and political unrest. And I think in those two pieces, I've been kind of exploring how to engage with these issues in a world that is like sound and movement focused. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to speak maybe as a final question about the reflection on the political moment. I think that's a really important thing to highlight in terms of the socio-political role that your work or that music and performance play?
Yeah, it's I have to say that I think it's a subtle nuance in my work, but it's always like in my mind when I create these works, especially being a woman artist from Turkey and not living in Turkey and putting art outside has this relationship between, how I deal with the issues from a distance. And many of us choose to leave right now. Has multi-layers, financial, political, and social cultural, like layers to it. But I think one of the things that is challenging is always imagining, how I could create this work there, and would it be possible to actually express myself in the same way? And I think working with the body movements helped me a lot to explore that area. And there is a little bit of entanglement that I think we're experiencing, all of us, from people who are dealing with these political struggles there. Cannot really divorce ourselves from the issues. It's been significantly affecting our lives and how I interpret things, but at the same time, we're trying to create our own worlds, even in Turkey when we live there. We try to carve some space to be creative and make a beautiful world out of it. So in the last piece, that's what I've been exploring, really being able to the world making process of, while we're experiencing these traumas and struggles. I think that the last piece, what you will be able to see it in the video, that's what it's all about.
Thank you so much, Doga. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you and to learn more about your work and your perspective. And I think we're so lucky to be able to kind of juxtapose and then join this conversation and community spotlight with your artistic contribution. So I'm really excited to weave these pieces together. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting. It was lovely to talk to you.
Yes, it's been awesome. So with that, y'all, you know what to look forward to. You'll see Doga's artistic feature coming right after this video, and we'll see you soon.